would you say that like the quote main gaining approach is not the best approach if you're trying to gain?
You're trying to get me in trouble on
No,
purpose.
I'm not.
Greg, if you're watching, I know you're going to make a video about this.
Of course I'm watching. Of course I'm making a video about this. Coach Greg, in today's video, Fouad Abiyad finally listens to Coach Greg. He's called me out in the video, but after further discussion, he says, you know what? Coach Greg was right. I'm going to play the video. We're going to show you. And of course, you all knew I was right.
I was like 130 pounds in grade 10. And then grade 11, I was 230 pounds. I like gained like 100 pounds like a year.
A lot of it was muscle? You didn't just get...
it was fat.
Oh. Trust me, he was a slob. He went from 130 pounds to 230 pounds in 1 year. How? By bulking. Eating a bunch of shit food, garbage, didn't care, just was getting in the macros. Force feeding, doing whatever. Eat big to get big. Yeah, right. Eat big to get big and fat.
I met a girl and we were dating and I'm like, I'm fat. Why is this girl dating me? So I'm like, I better get in shape. So I started doing like just circuit training and cardio. I was doing a lot of skipping and stuff. And
so he went from 130 pounds, gained 100 pounds. Probably most of it was fat. Was now 230 pounds. Met a girl, said, I'm fat. Lost approximately 50 pounds. How? From doing circuit training, skipping, cardio, and so on. Remember, he wasn't even lifting weights. And so do you really think he put on all that muscle by eating and all those calories? Of course not. And hear me out. If he went from 130 pounds to 230 and then cut down to 180, clearly he was holding at least 50 pounds of fat. And last I checked, if you're holding on to an extra 50 pounds of fat, you're not only fat, you are obese.
2 years later, I'm like trying to do that. Right.
Yeah.
But no, I was just like men's health cardio guy. And then when I went to the show, I was like, okay, maybe this is what I want to do.
And so 2 years later, at the age of 20, he began to use performance-enhancing drugs. He began using steroids at the same time as he began to start bodybuilding. And clearly, it worked out for him. And over the years, he's been promoting bulking and cutting, eating in a large, dramatic surplus to make sure you're getting in all the calories. That you need to get sloppy in the off-season in order to put on muscle. Why try to see your abs? If you can see your abs, you're probably holding back on your gains. You need to eat more. You need to eat big to get bigger.
How in the world did you start to stack on so much muscle? What are some key factors?
People are going to hate me for saying this, but I ate like a pig.
Fouad, the answer is steroids. I mean, are we serious? Think of it. He began training after high school. He had newbie gains completely left in the tank. He hadn't began lifting weights. Combine newbie gains with steroids and amazing genetics, and of course he's going to put on muscle. In comparison, I started training at 10. By the time I was 18, I'd already been training for 8 years. I was already a competitive bodybuilder. My newbie gains, they had expired. I've been training for years, and so of course it's going to take me a long time to build muscle. I never began taking steroids until I'd competed 42 times. And what is my methods? You main gain. If you bulk and cut, you can do that, but why? It doesn't help you any more than to main gain. And Fouad has been against that from the beginning. We've had heated debates. We've been going back and forth for years. But finally, Fouad believes in Coach Greg's methods.
I probably didn't have to do that. Okay. There's probably better ways to put on muscle. But I do believe that you have to get a little bit fat to put on muscle.
But remember, his definition of a little bit of fat is maybe 12 to 15% in the offseason. 15% body fat at most. That if you're a bodybuilder and you can't see any abs, then you're fat. Does that mean you have to have a shredded six-pack with vascularity pushing through and single-digit body fat? Of course not. I've been saying a healthy body fat for you. That if you're above 20% body fat, then you're overweight. You've eaten too much. You don't need to do that. That if you can't see your abs, then you're definitely fat.
I saw so many guys in my career stay lean and never really grow. They're like, oh, I want to stay lean in the off season. I'm like, all right. And they'd show up to stage the next year 2 pounds heavier.
And you know why that is, Fouad? Do you really think it's because they were lean in the off season, or do you think that they didn't have the genetics to continue to put on muscle? Not everyone can continue to put on muscle. You started lifting weights when you were perhaps 18 years of age. I started when I was 10. I continued to put on muscle naturally for about 20 years. Eventually hit my natural genetic limit. Then I used steroids and continue to put on muscle. If you start using steroids when you're a teenager, there's only so long you're going to be able to put on muscle. The reason people are not continuing to put on muscle is because eventually you don't have any muscle to put on. Your genetics can only take you so far. Steroids can only take you so far. And just deciding to get fat is not going to allow you to put on more muscle. And when you do, in fact, decide to diet, if you are, in fact, obese in the off season, you're going to lose a shit ton of muscle as you begin to diet.
And I'm not saying you have to get fat, but I remember John Jewett put it best. He said, you should be at the body fat percentage that you perform at best, under 15%.
Under 15%. And so what we're having is a miscommunication in what fat actually means. Fouad is saying you should be under 15%. I think you should get fat, but you should be under 15%. 15% is an ideal body fat percentage for most people. 15% is not fat, it's ideal. And so when I said don't get fat in the off season, do you not think I meant exactly the same thing as Fouad meant? And so all of this time, we were thinking the exact same thing.
So he's like, if you perform really, really well at 8%, stay at 8%. If you're like your gym performance, like your lifting, your pumps, all that.
Have I ever said you should maintain 8% body fat in the off season? 8% body fat is roughly what I am. This is ridiculous. I look 6 weeks out from competition.
Wherever your performance is best, that's where you should be. But that's something I didn't do.
And so I've literally been saying this for years, but yet I've been hated on, I've been shit on, I've been told main gaining doesn't work, and it still happens every single day. Go look on Reddit, look on the internet. Coach Greg says to main gain, it's stupid, it's moronic, it's been proven wrong. Fouad is literally agreeing with me 100%. He even goes so far as to say 8% body fat. I've said don't try to maintain single-digit body fat in the offseason. How many times have I said that? Single-digit, for those of you who don't know math very well, it's under 10. 10 is double digits. There's a 1 and a 0. Try to maintain somewhere between 10 and 15% body fat. For bodybuilders, I believe closer to 12. The fatter you get, the harder it is to get into contest shape. And so, for example, you take a guy like Mike Israetel. He likes to bulk and cut. Mike Israetel knows you shouldn't get fat in the offseason. It has no benefit. And so what does Mike do? Well, he bulks up to perhaps 245 pounds, and then he cuts down. But the problem is the cutting, it's more difficult than last time. And how do I know that? Well, in his last competition, he's on a semaglutide. That is a drug given to diabetics to help them to go on a diet. It's because he's got a very large appetite. He's hungrier than last time. And what were his results? He was far out of condition. He wasn't nearly lean enough. Had he been lean enough, perhaps he would be an IBB pro. How did bulking and cutting work for Mike? Mike, an expert, he has his own apps. He knows what he's doing. He's an expert. He has a PhD. But yet the bulk and cut couldn't work for him. And so it's not working for Mike Israetel. How is it going to work for you? But no, Coach Greg doesn't know what he's talking about, despite the fact that I've coached several athletes to be IBB pros. I'm an IBB pro myself. I've written my own cookbooks. I've coached for years, been training since I was 10. But I couldn't know as much as Mike. How could that be possible? After all, I only have my master's, had the highest average in my undergrad and my master's. But what would I know?
So my formula was, I'm going to overdo everything, which also probably led to some of my health issues later in life.
But why would we listen to Coach Greg? I mean, when you main gain, you maintain a healthy body fat percentage for you. Perhaps it's 11%, maybe it's 13, maybe it's 15, whatever. Whatever's healthy for you. And what does that do? Well, it prevents you from developing body dysmorphia. You know, when you feel fat and you look in the mirror and you're not happy with your appearance. It allows you to have a better and healthier life. You're not getting fat. You're not going on crash diet. You don't need to use a semaglutide to help control your appetite. You just exist. You just live, healthy. You do 150 minutes of cardio year round. You don't just watch guys like Mike O'Hearn who, we only need to do cardio when we're dieting. We're trying to be fat burning machines only when it comes to diet. This is BS.
I learned a lot going through it, but the thing is, when you start, you're so fresh that you can kind of get away with that stuff and still put on muscle.
I mean, think of it. A guy with amazing genetics, he's using steroids, he's training harder than last time. Of course he's going to put on muscle, regardless of the fact that he was bulking, regardless of the fact that he had to been main gaining. And I would argue if he had been eating a main gain diet, maintaining 15% body fat year round, he'd only be healthier and potentially have furthered his career.
I had put on 10 pounds of muscle a year for those 5 years. So it wasn't like it didn't work.
Did I ever say bulking and cutting doesn't work? Of course not. I'm just saying you can gain the same amount of muscle by main gaining, except it's even healthier.
They couldn't handle looking in the mirror and not being able to see their abs or whatever. And I'm like, it's just, And I'm not saying you have to get fat.
Fouad Abia is literally agreeing with me. He's saying exactly what I've been saying. The only difference is people think that, oh, we disagree with everything. Just because I say the main gain and not to bulk and cut, that, oh, we have such different ideas. Have you now seen the evidence? Are you agreeing with me?
I don't think that's the right approach. Well, I shouldn't say that. I actually agree with John Jewett.
And so instead of saying, I actually agree with Greg Doucette, he says, I actually agree with John Jewett, who says what Coach Greg says. Are you getting this? Do you understand this? He can't just say, yeah, Greg was right all along. I'm sorry, Coach Greg. I now agree with you. I understand what you've been saying.
You know, one of the nice things about doing a podcast for 3 or 4 years, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is you learn to talk to people that are a lot smarter than you are.
And unfortunately, Fouad's never had me on the podcast. I haven't messaged him in private. I did say I would go on his podcast. Fouad knows this is true. I asked him to come on mine as well. And he says he likes to learn from people who are smarter than him. I don't want to say how intelligent I am, but I am going to tell you I have my master's in kinesiology. I had the highest GPA. I do, in fact, know what I'm saying.
I'm not all the way to saying it's as effective. I still think you need a good surplus of calories, but I think that's my thought process now.
And so basically who I was told is that Coach Greg has been right all along. I've never actually said 8%. I've said 10 to 15. And so let's replace 8% with 10. You're at 10% body fat. You get great pumps in the gym. You feel good. Do you not think you can put on just as much muscle as if you're bulking? Case in point, I don't know. Let's take somebody, maybe you've never heard of him. Derek Lunsford. Derek Lunsford in his off season is 10% body fat. Have you seen this guy? The guy's shredded. I got to meet him. Been cheering for him to win the Mr. Olympia. All he had to do was get in completely dialed in. I believe he would be the champion, and he's done it. He's made countless videos with Coach Greg, worked out with him, and he's an amazing guy. At his fattest offseason, he gets to maybe 10% body fat. He's got striations in his glutes offseason. Guy's incredible. He's an animal. He went from the 212 category to his last competition weighing over 230 pounds. He's put on a ton of muscle, all while main gaining. The best bodybuilder in the world is main gaining. And so let's think about this. Does main gaining work? Well, I don't know. It worked for Derek Lunsford. Has Chris Bumstead ever looked fat to you? Oh, I don't know. Main gaining doesn't work. Well, how does Chris Bumstead look? Did he get fat and sloppy in the offseason? Did he go above 15% body fat? I've never seen Chris above 12% body fat after any Olympia he's ever won.
You know, Greg's model, the main gaining thing is like 500 calories, a 500 calorie surplus.
It's actually less than 500 calories. Main gaining means you maintain the same body fat percentage. You don't get fat. Whatever body fat percentage is healthy, let's call it 12%. Whatever that is, you just keep the 12% and you continue to put on muscle. You don't need to go into 500 calorie surplus. If you're in a 500 calorie surplus, you're going to get fat. And now if you just finished a bodybuilding competition, of course, 500 plus at least. But remember, these guys are shredded. You then go on a surplus until you get to your maintenance point. The maintenance body fat that's healthy. For Derek Lunsford, perhaps he competes at 3.5-4% body fat. Then in his off season, he eats in a calorie surplus until he gets to 10% body fat. Once he's at 10% body fat, he just main gains. He eats enough food so that his body fat doesn't continue to rise, and he puts on muscle from there. Slowly, steadily, and surely, he continues to put on muscle. How has it worked for him?
I would just go a little bit further just to make sure, because I'm always of the mindset that I want to make sure all my bases are covered. So if I go to 1,000 calories, then I'm like, okay, I'm definitely covered.
But Fouad, here's the problem. If you're in a 1,000 calorie surplus, you're surely going to get fat. 3,500 calorie surplus is required to gain 1 pound of body fat. If you're eating in a 1,000 calorie surplus every single day, that's 7,000 extra calories. There's no way your body's going to use all of those extra calories to put on muscle.
And then if I start to get too fat, I can always pull back a little bit, right?
And so this is how main gaining works. You eat whatever you want. You don't need to count your calories. You just eat. If your body fat is 12% and that's where you feel your best, and you're eating and you don't even count your macros, your calories, nothing, you just eat. Perhaps you're eating from my cookbook, you're having anabolic French toast, you're having protein ice cream, pizzas, you're having anabolic risotto, and so on. If you're at 12% body fat and you feel and look amazing, and then suddenly you go up to 14 and you're thinking, well, why am I now 14? The answer is because you're eating too much. You felt great at 12, so why are you now 14? And if it continues to go on and you're now 15, 16, and so on, guess what? You're not main gaining anymore. It's called bulking. That is what I'm against. I'm not for bulking, I'm for main gaining. And let's say you ideally function at 12% and you've been not counting in your calories, you're just eating, and suddenly you're down to 11 and now you're down to 10. Your strength in the gym is going down. You can't get the same pumps. Guess what? You're not eating enough. And so what do? You eat more. Do you need to count how many calories? No, you just eat more. It's not that complicated. The vast majority of people, 95%, they don't know how to track their calories. They think they do. They try to. They're not smart enough. I understand how difficult it is. Labels lie and so on. And so what do? You just eat. You look yourself in the mirror. You measure yourself on a scale. If you're not eating enough, your body fat is going to go down. If 12% is your ideal, that's where you should function. And suddenly you're getting shredded every day and you're losing weight and the scale weight's going 1 pound down every week. You eat more. And you suddenly eat more and you go back to 12% and you keep eating more and it goes to 13, 14, 15. What happens? You eat less. Why? Because you've been bulking. It's not that complicated. How's it been working for me? I literally been maintaining somewhere between 7 and 9% body fat for 5 years straight. And guess what? I don't add and track my calories. I don't count macros. I don't do any of that stuff. I just eat. I love the recipes in my cookbook. I like to do cardio. I race bikes. Some days I'm eating 3,500 calories. Some days it's 4,000. Some days it's 3,000. Maybe some days it's 5,000. But if I eat 5,000 calories in one day, I'm not as hungry the next. It's normal. I eat less. And so I main gain. And so in the last several weeks, I'm up 7 pounds. Am I fat? I don't think so. Perhaps my body fat went up 0.5%. That's okay. And why has it gone up? Well, I've been using Turk Builder. Turk Builder, I know many of you don't know what this is. It's got turkesterone. Some of you believe it's snake oil. You don't believe there's actually turkesterone. We've got the labs to prove it. To prove it, we tested other people's turkesterone. None of it had Turk. Ours was the only one that did. The turkesterone is sourced from Uzbekistan. If you don't believe me, don't buy it. Unsubscribe. Subscribe to Fouad. If you think that I'm a liar, why are you watching me? Why are you watching this video? You don't need to watch my channel. And so if you don't believe me, you think I'm a liar, you think I'm a snake oil salesman, please unsubscribe right now. Do it now. Do I look like I need people who hate me? I don't need you. You can go and subscribe to someone else.
Do you think it's just like a time thing? Like with a 500 calorie surplus, you might not see anything within like 2 years, but then if you were to do 1,000 calories, maybe within a year, you might start to notice.
Let's do some quick math. 500 calories times 365 days, 182,500 calorie surplus. Divide by 3,500. 52 pounds of fat. And so in a year, if you followed a 500 calorie surplus, if you never put on any muscle, you gain 52 pounds of fat. But of course, some of that's going to turn to muscle. Perhaps if you're lucky, you're going to put on 10 pounds of muscle. And so if you think that a 500 calorie surplus for a year is worth it, you want to do that to put on 10 pounds of muscle combined with say 40 pounds of fat, then do it. If I eat in a 500 calorie surplus for a year and I suddenly at the end of it weigh 235 pounds, am I going to look good? I don't think so. I think I'll be obese. But would that be worth it for gaining 10 pounds of muscle? Well, maybe. But guess what? If you've gained all that weight, you're now going to have to go on a diet. And so for 4 months, perhaps even more, I'm going to have to go on a diet, perhaps a crash diet. What's going to then happen to those muscles? I'm going to lose some of them. In comparison, if I main gain the entire time, maybe I only eat 100 calorie surplus. Maybe it's 150, whatever. And at the end of the year, I put on only 7 pounds of muscle. It's less than the guy that bulked. But guess what? I put on 7 pounds of muscle and 0 pounds of fat. And so at the end of the year, I don't need to go on a diet. I'm now 192 pounds with no increase in body fat. And so if you're 12% at the start of the year, you're now 12% at the end of the year. You now don't have to go on a diet. And so while that person's dieting on a cut, perhaps starving themselves, you are now continuing to main gain. And so 4 months later, you've now added perhaps 2 or 3 more pounds of muscle. And the person who bulked and cut, well, guess what? They probably lost some. After all, they were 235 pounds. They've been dieting for 4 months. They're in a calorie deficit consistently. And so what do you think's happened to their muscle? Do you get it now? Do you not understand these things? Why do you doubt me? Have I not proven myself day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade? Why do you question what I say? I get it. You can't believe everything I've said, but I have over 3,500 videos. 3,500. I'm an IFBB Pro, my master's in kinesiology. I have an IFBB Pro card, and I've coached thousands of athletes, including IFBB Pros. Why are you doubting me?
I don't know. Theoretically, it doesn't make sense because if you're in a surplus, you're in a surplus and your body's gaining as much muscle as it can at that rate. So if I'm at 1,000 calories, maybe I'm gaining more fat.
Fouad, you're arguing against yourself. What you're saying is proving what I've been saying. And so here's the thing. Fouad, he doesn't understand that. I am very good at math. I was a math school teacher. I understand this. Fouad is saying, look, you need to eat in 1,000 calorie surplus because what if you do more cardio in one day, you go for more walks and you burn more calories? By being in 1,000 calorie surplus, it's ensuring that you're always in a surplus because what if on one day you perhaps went for a bike ride, you burn off 1,000 calories. If you're in 1,000 calorie surplus and you burn off 1,000 calories in your bike ride, then you weren't actually in a surplus and so you're not going to build muscle. But here's the thing, Fouad. When you say you're in a calorie surplus, it's regardless of how many calories you're burning. And so when you're in a calorie surplus, let's call it 100. If on one day you sat in bed all day and slept and you burn off 2,000 calories, you need to eat 2,100. If on another day you happen to run a marathon and you burn off 5,000 calories, 100 calorie surplus would be 5,100 calories. The calorie surplus is independent of how many calories you're burning on that day. A very small calorie surplus is all you ever need. And one more thing, it's okay if you're not always in a surplus every freaking minute. If you're eating 5 meals a day, sometimes you're going to be below maintenance and sometimes you're going to be above. But that's okay. Some people don't even eat 5 meals a day. Some people only eat 1 meal a day. And so think of it. If you haven't eaten in 16 hours, your body is probably in a deficit. It doesn't matter though. It doesn't matter! Now, yes, you're going to build more muscle if you eat 5 meals a day with protein in it than if you build 1, but you don't have to always be in a calorie surplus every single minute. So for example, I did a bike race before this video. I burn off about 850 calories. I didn't eat right before that race. And so just because I didn't eat right before that race doesn't mean that I just lost muscle while racing. I ate after the bike race. And that's okay. I don't have to eat every minute during every pedal stroke. You're allowed to go 4 or 5 hours without eating. Even if you're doing cardio, it's okay.
So I feel like if I give myself enough surplus, then I don't have to worry about ever thinking I didn't eat enough.
Instead of thinking of it as every single day you need to be in a 500 calorie surplus, it's okay if one day you're in a 500 surplus, the next day you're at even. The next day after that, you're in a 500 calorie surplus, the next day you're at even. There's something known as glycogen. Your glycogen can store hundreds of grams of carbohydrates. And so even if on any given day, you're perhaps in a slight deficit, perhaps on Monday you ate 3,000 calories. You're in a surplus, you're feeling good, but on Tuesday, you went for that 3-hour walk and you burn extra calories, and you didn't happen to get in that extra meal that you needed. It's okay. You have glycogen store. It's for a reason. It's for when you don't eat enough. The glycogen store gets converted to energy and you use that to go for that walk. The next day you then eat more. Perhaps you then eat 3,500 calories to make up for the fact that you did extra walking the day before. And so if on Monday 2,500, Tuesday 3,000, the next day 3,500, the next day 2,500, you can average these things out. The total calories would be how many calories you eat in a week divided by 7. That is your daily calorie intake. And so just because you didn't eat enough calories on the Monday, if you ate enough calories the rest of the week, you're fine. It's perfectly okay.
I never planned my diets by calorie. I planned them by macros. If you're on gear, I feel like your requirements are different. So I would say I need 1.5 grams to 2 grams per pound for protein.
The research shows and supports that at most, even with steroids, 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight is the maximum amount that could be a benefit. What do the general person need to know? 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. If you're getting that, you're getting enough. And in reality, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, that is oftentimes more than enough. And even with steroids, you don't need 1.5 to 2. That is complete bro science. It's not of any benefit. Now, if you're trying to diet and you're trying to be more satiated, more full, of course you can eat more protein. The more protein you eat, the more the thermic effect of food is going to apply. It takes more energy to digest protein, convert that to body fat than it does, for example, carbs and fat to turn into body fat. And so if you have a high protein diet, you're more likely going to be able to stay lean. It's not a requirement to build muscle. It's not going to help you to build more. And so the guy having 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight compared to the guy that has 1, they're not going to build more muscle. It may help them to be leaner because after all, if you're eating chicken breast and steak, it's a lot easier to put the fork down than if you're eating chips and Haagen-Dazs.
If I felt like my pumps weren't as good or if like I was getting too fat, those carb numbers would go up or down depending on how my body looked. That was my system.
And so here's the thing, Fouad. Whether you're tracking your macros or your calories, it's the same thing. Because if you're not losing weight and you reduce your carbs and or body fat, what the net result is you're reducing calories. And so you can say, I didn't really care about calories. I just cared about macros. But when you lower macros, carbs or fat, you're lowering calories.
I kind of become a proponent of the carnivore diet, or a version of it, because I kind of like the carnivore diet plus vegetables.
This is like saying, I want you to get wet, but you can't go in the water. A carnivore diet, by definition, does not include vegetables. And so if you're saying go on a carnivore diet plus vegetables, what you're saying is you want them to go on a balanced diet. You want food from various food groups. And so, no, it's not a carnivore diet plus vegetables. It's called a balanced diet. And so how about you listen to my diet? The circle diet. It's the forever diet. It basically means you can eat from all 4 food groups. You eat healthy fats, you eat meats, you have dairy, you have vegetables, you have fruit. Anyone that tells you can't eat fruit because there's sugar, well, they don't know what they're talking about. Do you really think that blueberries, raspberries, strawberries are somehow bad for you? Do people not understand that you need micronutrients? There are antioxidants in fruit. Fruit has a lot of fiber. It's healthy. It's not the same thing as going out and having a pop from McDonald's. Interested in getting my Circle Diet book? Probably take you 6 hours to read this. If you read this and understand it, I'm telling you, no more than 99% of YouTubers, you would not believe the information you can gather from reading just this book. And if you eat even 5 recipes from this book, it can change your life. Literally, close to 100,000 people have been buying my books. 95% of diets fail, but not this one. This is the Forever Diet. Code Greg, 15% off.
Do you know of any bodybuilders, and you don't need to name names, but do you see bodybuilders using Ozempic to make preps easier these days?
Mike Israetel literally talks about being on a semi-glutide helps him to curb his appetite. I'm not a fan of that. Many bodybuilders are using a semi-glutide such as Ozempic. I'm not a fan of this. Research supports the fact that people who use Ozempic, semi-glutides and so on, a lot of the weight they're losing are in fact muscle. It perhaps has negative side effects. It was not studied for bodybuilders. This is a weight loss drug that was designed for people with type 2 diabetics. These are people who are obese that the doctors think they could need and benefit from this drug. I certainly don't think that people who have single-digit body fat should feel the need to resort to using Ozempic.
No, I can't see it making sense, because it's supposed to make you not want to eat.
Yeah.
Which is not what bodybuilders are doing.
So here's the thing. Many bodybuilders, to get shredded, they're starving. They're hungry all the time. And so they're looking for anything to help them not be hungry. Now, perhaps Ozempic is better than to resorting to all of the drugs that people are using. For the most part, many people are using recreational drugs. And so I do believe Ozempic is a better choice than that. But for Fouad to say, I don't think any bodybuilders are using it because why would they want to decrease their appetite? I don't believe that.
Like in a prep, when you have to bring those calories down, you think
but
that
even when bodybuilders bring calories down, it's still, like, depending on the size of them, obviously, they're still at 3,000 calories. It's not like they're eating like 1,000 calories, right?
I mean, I don't know if Fouad knows how few calories most bodybuilders are eating. For example, Derek Lunsford, Mr. Olympia, in the offseason, eating under 4,000 calories a day. I know that Chris Bumstead at one point had cut his calories to 1,800 calories a day. Chris Bumstead, over 6'1", 260 pounds, he cuts down. He was eating 1,800 calories a day. I know Eric Janicki, who's a part owner of Harder Than Last Time, he's now at 2,400 calories a day. The man is over 6 feet tall, close to 260 pounds. The guys are hungry. And if you're less hungry, it's going to be easier to stick to your diet and you're going to come in more shredded.
What are some things you did when you were in prep to try to like distract yourself? I know like cardio obviously is good. Hanging out in the gym is not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you what I did, for example. When I was starving out of my mind, I would eat a giant salad with spinach. A giant 1-pound bag of spinach only has approximately 100 calories, has over 10 grams of protein. Put some low-calorie, no sugar added Mrs. Butterworth, and you have a low-calorie salad. I'm telling you, when you're hungry, you got to do what you got to do. Oftentimes, I would have protein ice cream. It was very low in calories and very filling. These recipes are, in fact, in my cookbook, low-calorie, delicious recipes for the big eater. No, you're not going to see a spinach salad with Mrs. Buttersworth on it, but these are some of the tricks that I was doing to maintain sub 5% body fat as I dieted down for competition.
There was a lot of hunger. There's a lot of Crystal Light drinking. There's a lot of Diet Pop.
And so he would drink Crystal Light, Diet Pop, did the same thing. These items can keep your mind away from eating and help you to stay on your diet.
I got some lettuce. I went home. I made a plate lettuce and I squirted mustard all over it.
And so, for example, if you got my cookbook and turn to page 210, it says veggies with the most protein per 100 calories. And so if you were to eat vegetables from this list, you would see watercress, 900 grams, that's 2 pounds, 20.5 grams of protein. And so you could eat all the watercress you want, 2 pounds, and only have 100 calories for 20.5 grams of protein. You ain't getting fat having watercress. And so depending on the vegetable you want, you can look up how many 100 calories are, how much protein you're going to get, and you can choose the one that you want. And so do you now see how relevant and valuable the cookbook really is? If you're on a diet and you want to see which fruits, which vegetables you can eat, which ones are going to be the lowest in calories, have the most protein, the most fiber, and so on, why don't you just quickly reference check in my cookbook? Delicious recipes with strawberries, bananas, various fruits. They are amazing. They taste amazing, and they are for the big eater. And I'm certain you have no idea just how good this book is. I don't have a day that I go out. I'm down at the bar dancing harder than last time, and sure enough, I'm taking dozens of photos with various fans. They're saying, hey, I bought your cookbook. I lost 100 pounds. The French toast recipe was my favorite. The protein ice cream. The list goes on and on. You would not believe how good this book is. Nearly 100,000 of these books sold, and imagine the difference it's made in so many people's lives.
There's nothing you can do. There's no real tricks to avoid it. You're going to get hungry. You're going to suffer if you want to get peeled.
There you have it. Fouad has agreed with me all along. He just didn't realize it. Main gaining works. Perhaps maintain 10 to 15% body fat. I'm going to say 8% is a little bit lean, but hey, whatever works for you. Subscribe, click the bell button, comment to boost the algorithm, like the video if you in fact liked it. Please watch one of those tube loops, and of course the cookbooks, the training books, the Circle Diet book, coaching plans by me and my team. If you have no money, we have the free diet and training program. It's close to 50 pages in length, and we have multiple ones of these. You can get that on the website, as well as join the 300,000 plus newsletter subscribers. And until next time, I am out.